Well, hello everyone. You're listening to Watchman Internet Radio, and we're playing the blues today. In fact, that little number was called Blues This Morning. I hope you're all doing well. Let's consider the daily text for Sunday, January 27th. It's taken from Revelation 6:14. It says, "Every mountain and every island was removed from its place." The Watchtower comment goes, "Much of the evil that is done in this world is the work not of individuals, but of organizations. Think of the religious organizations that deceive millions of people about the nature of God, the trustworthiness of the Bible, the future of the earth and mankind, and many other subjects. Or what about the governments that promote war and ethnic violence, that oppress the poor and defenseless, that thrive on bribery and favoritism? What about greedy corporations that pollute the environment, deplete natural resources, and exploit the gullibility of consumers in order to bring untold wealth to a few while millions struggle in poverty? God's word foretells that the governments of this old world and all their dependent organizations will be rocked from their foundations, destroyed, along with all those who side with them against God's kingdom." Well, I don't know where to start with this. Think of the religious organizations that deceive millions of people about, the nature of God and many other subjects. How about the subject of the return of Christ? The Watchtower claims Jesus returned in 1914. Is that not a deception? It certainly is. This daily text article is taken from a Watchtower, as they all are. And the Watchtower's title goes something like, "What will go when God's kingdom comes?" What will go when God's kingdom comes? The Watchtower claims God's kingdom came in 1914. But in a mind-twisting effort to paper over that, they say he's coming again. They make a big deal of Christ's kingdom has been ruling for 100 years. But what will go when the kingdom comes? Has it come or not? 3 comings? Is that it? Christ is going to come 3 times? Maybe 4? How many? I mean, we're talking about a massive deception. Think of the religious organizations that deceive millions. You think the Watchtower is immune from that? They can put on a bold face, but it is sheer hypocrisy. I think they're trying to cope with the fact that the work I've been doing over the past 18 years or so, pointing out the error of 1914. And so now they speak more about the kingdom coming and what will happen when the kingdom comes. But there is no way that they can really explain these prophecies, for example, in Revelation, without discarding 1914. For example, Revelation, the scripture we read about every mountain being rocked from its place, that occurs with the opening of the 6th seal. In fact, let me read that from Revelation chapter 6. They just quoted a little fragment of it. John says, "I saw when he opened the 6th seal, and a great earthquake occurred, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the entire moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, as when a fig tree is shaken by a high wind and drops its unripe figs. And the heaven departed as a scroll that is being rolled up, and every mountain and every island was removed from its place. Then the kings of the earth, the high officials, the military commanders, the rich, the strong, every slave, every free person hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And it goes on to say, they kept saying to the mountains and to the rocks, fall over us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb, because the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand? Well, according to the Watchtower's comment, they're implying that this opening of the sixth seal is Armageddon. That is the absolute end of all religions and all human governments. But is it? If every mountain is removed from its place, how is it that the people say to the mountains and to the rocks, fall over us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne? So it's not talking about Armageddon. And besides, this is the opening of the sixth seal. There is a seventh seal, and a number of things occur after the opening of the seventh seal. For instance, there are 7 angels who appear with 7 trumpets, and they blow the trumpets, and events occur in succession, not the least of which is the appearance of this locust plague that torment the people that do not have the seal of God. Not only that, the sealing of the saints does not take place until the 7th seal is opened. And the 4 winds of destruction are held back until the sealing has occurred, I should say. So obviously, the collapse of these mountains is not the end of the world, as the Watchtower is implying. But they have a bigger interpretive problem. That's because they say that the 6th seal was opened way back 100 years ago during World War I. The Watchtower claims that all of the 7 seals are opened in succession, which is obviously true. And there's not a great lapse of time between each of their opening, which is obviously also true. But because they're attached to 1914, and seals 2, 3, and 4 symbolize nation rising against nation, kingdom against kingdom, food shortages, and pestilence. And the Watchtower will defend to its very end that all of this has already occurred. It's all history, World War I and the Spanish influenza. And to make it make sense, they have to also teach that the 6th and 7th seal were opened back then. And so in their Revelation book, they claim that all of the turmoil and upheaval that has occurred since 1914 have been preliminary tremors to the big earthquake that's going to bring down the whole thing. For example, let me just read a paragraph to you from the Revelation Grand Climax book. Paragraph 5 in the chapter, it's called Earthquakes in the Lord's Day. It says, thus, when C.T. Russell appeared for morning worship with the Brooklyn, New York Bethel family on the morning of October 2nd, 1914, he made the dramatic announcement, the Gentile times have ended. Their kings have had their day. Indeed, the worldwide upheaval that began in 1914 was so far-reaching that many long-standing monarchies disappeared. The overthrow of Tsardom and the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 led to a long confrontation between Marxism and capitalism. Tremors of political change continue to disturb human society earthwide. Today, many governments fail to survive more than a year or two. lack of stability in the political world is illustrated in the case of Italy, which had 47 new governments in just 42 years following World War II. But such advanced tremors are only preliminary to a climatic governmental upheaval. The result? God's kingdom will take over sole rulership of the earth. And this is rich, too. Paragraph 6, they quote from a couple of guys that are really the bedrock of the British Empire and their propaganda system, H.G. Wells and Bertrand Russell. And then they quote Harold Macmillan, a former Prime Minister of Great Britain. Harold Macmillan was saying that before 1914, everybody thought things would just get better and better. This was the world I was born in. Suddenly, unexpectedly, one morning in 1914, the whole thing came to an end. But did it? Did the Gentile nations have their day? Well, they're still ruling the world, aren't they? Have things not gotten better since 1914? I mean, they've invented vaccines to do away with certain diseases that would kill millions of people. Isn't that an improvement? People got around in horses and buggies back then. Look at us now, jetting around the world. And wouldn't you say that's an improvement? Things have gotten better. Besides, the governments of Great Britain, the United States, France, they've remained stable. Where's this great upheaval? Now they're going to talk about the Great Depression that rocked particularly the United States beginning in 1929, and how now financial gimmicks, pyramid schemes, and lotteries and other gambling subterfuges, many are which are sponsored by governments, that should be protecting the people. Even Christendom's television evangelists stretch out their hands for their multi-million-dollar share. Well, this was written back in, 1988? The Watchtower is getting their share now, too, I suppose, aren't they? But here's the thing. If the great earthquake that brings down the governments has not occurred, by the Watchtower's interpretation, they make it all anticlimactic. The name of the book, The Grand Climax, is at hand. According to the Watchtower, the Grand Climax has already occurred. The problem they're faced with, none of the seals have been opened. They will be opened in rapid succession, but it hasn't begun yet. And when this sixth seal is opened, it will signify the collapse of all human government. The whole system, the financial system, it will all become inoperable. Just look like in the United States, the government has been shut down for a few weeks, a month, I guess. And it's only part of the government, but people are already rattled by it. And it's not even all services, obviously. And local governments continue to function and provide their services. But just think if it all stopped. People would be desperate, wouldn't they? They would be in anguish, as Jesus said. The nations will be in anguish, not knowing the way out. But before that comes, first comes war, food shortages, pestilence, and then the collapse. And from the ashes of that collapse comes the eighth king. And that's what people will clamor for. Any government is better than no government. Any government is better than being subjected to God's kingdom. Fall over us and protect us from the one seated on the throne. So what the Watchtower said, let me scroll up here, in the fifth paragraph that I read, talking about the result of this collapse, God's kingdom will take over sole rulership of the earth. And that is just not true. After this collapse, the eighth king will be ruling concurrently with Jesus Christ. It will be in competition, and that will bring about the judgment of mankind. Those who give their devotion to this eighth king, this image of the wild beast, will receive the 666, the mark of the beast, and that will signify their permanent doom, a death from which there will be no resurrection. The Bible says that their names are not written in the book of life. And all of this will take place during a 3.5-year period, 1,260 days, 42 months, whatever you want. Well, it's interesting that the symbolism used is what Jesus spoke about, the sun turning black, the moon turning to blood, the stars of the heavens falling. I just read an article this morning, and I tweeted it, so if you want to read it, just look at the top of my Twitter feed. China, Russia building super EMP bombs for blackout warfare. This article is on Free Beacon, published January 24, 2019. I won't read all of it. It's kind of lengthy, but it says several nations, including China and Russia, are building powerful nuclear bombs designed to produce super electromagnetic pulse waves capable of devastating all electronics, from computers to electric grids, for hundreds of miles, according to a newly released congressional study. Well, this EMP is nothing new. Every nuclear explosion puts off gamma rays, which create an electrical voltage. But the strategy with setting off a nuclear device high up in the atmosphere, the blast itself would not produce catastrophic damage on the Earth. It wouldn't kill anyone directly. But this mega voltage would go into the electronic hardware and simply fry everything. And every bomb has that capability, that capacity. Most of them, if you want to do the damage, the bomb explodes just a little off the ground. But the whole idea of an EMP bomb, it's exploded high up in the atmosphere. The higher up, the greater the widespread EMP. But apparently, some nuclear bombs are being designed with the sole intent of producing a powerful EMP, a super electromagnetic pulse. And they could black out an entire nation. The sun going black, the moon turning to blood, the stars of heaven fall. Just think if the moon and the sun didn't shine. Jehovah literally caused that effect back in the Exodus from Egypt. I think it was 3 days. He caused the sun not to rise. Pitch black over Egypt, but the sun shone upon the land of Goshen where the Israelites were. But Revelation is not talking about a literal phenomenon where the sun literally turns black or the moon literally turns to blood. These evangelical wackos talk about the blood moon and all this nonsense. The Bible is written in symbolism. And that's why I ask you to just imagine if the sun literally didn't rise, or the moon turned dark, or the stars fell from heaven. Of course, it's not literally possible for the stars to fall anywhere. They couldn't fall to this tiny little earth. That's ridiculous. But it's symbolism. The mountains being shaken are symbolism. The Watchtower recognizes that. It symbolizes the governments being brought down in collapse. And that would happen if this EMP thing were implemented. Of course, China and Russia realized that the Anglo war planners have every intention of attacking Russia and China. They don't want war, but they realize it is, at this point, pretty much inevitable. And so they're preparing for war, just as the United States and NATO are preparing for war. I commented on the Watchtower's identification of Russia and her allies as the new king of the North. And Anthony Morris cited this gigantic war games that Russia was conducting a few weeks ago in conjunction with her allies, which we know was China. And his implication was that Russia, just out of the blue, is preparing for war. He didn't mention that the United States and NATO have been conducting war games also beforehand, which has brought about Russia's response, and they're preparing for war. But it's been initiated by the Anglo-American power. He didn't mention that. So, I mean, it shows you he's eating the propaganda that's coming out of the mainstream media in Britain and America, and I suppose in Europe. We are being subjected to the biggest propaganda campaign that has ever been initiated by any government. And over the years, they have acquired influence with all the major media, both printed news, television, radio, internet, and it's an outlet for propaganda aimed at Russia, China, and anyone who wants to have peace with those nations. They're moving us closer and closer to war and to civil war, really. They're widening the great divide, a cultural war. This past week, there was a big deal about this kid wearing a MAGA hat, a red cap that President Trump wore, Make America Great Again, MAGA. And supposedly this kid attacked this Native American. Turns out it was totally the other way around. This guy was a provocateur, and the kid just stood there. But now he's getting death threats, and the media is attacking. Like, they're attacking, anybody that is loyal to the President of the United States, who's a white patriot. So these forces want to overturn this whole country, the nation-state system, set up this global communistic system, and they're going to succeed. I can tell you that right now. They're not going to make America great. It's going to go down, and so are a lot of other nations. That's the collapse that's coming, and that will be the hour of test that comes upon the world. People will be forced to side with either God's kingdom or Satan's last government. Well, this daily text, they cited a verse. Let me go back there. They cited Jeremiah 25:31, speaking about the tribulation. I'm going to read that entire span. It says, "A noise will certainly resound to the ends of the earth, for Jehovah has a controversy with the nations. He will personally pass judgment on all humans, and he will put the wicked to the sword, declares Jehovah." This is what Jehovah of armies says. "Look, a calamity is spreading from nation to nation, and a great tempest will be unleashed from the remotest parts of the earth. And those slain by Jehovah in that day will be from one end of the earth clear to the other end of the earth. They will not be mourned, nor will they be gathered up or buried. They will become like manure on the surface of the ground." Well, that next verse, the Watchtower should carefully read this. "Wail, you shepherds, and cry out. Wallow about, you majestic ones of the flock, because the time of your slaughter and your dispersion has come. and you will fall like a precious vessel. The shepherds have no place to flee, and there is no escape for the majestic ones of the flock. Listen, the outcry of the shepherds and the wailing of the majestic ones of the flock, for Jehovah is devastating their pasture. Well, this all came about in a typical way when Jehovah brought Nebuchadnezzar into the Middle East. He destroyed Judah and all the nations round about. But obviously it has a much grander fulfillment, doesn't it? The verse I just read, it shows that it will be from one end of the earth clear to the other, and God will pass judgment on all humans. So we're talking about the end of the world. But now I would direct your attention up to verses 27, 28, and 29. As I also read there, God is calling woe to the shepherds, the leaders of his people, the elders of his people, the majestic ones of the flock. Well, now he tells Jeremiah, this is what Jehovah of armies says. Say to them, drink and get drunk and vomit and fall so you cannot get up because of the sword that I am sending among you. And if they refuse to take the cup out of your hand to drink, you must say to them, this is what Jehovah of armies says. You must drink it. For look, if I am bringing calamity first on the city that bears my name, should you go unpunished? You will not go unpunished, for I am calling for a sword against all the inhabitants of the earth, declares Jehovah of armies. So Jeremiah was told to go to the kings of all the nations, to Tyre and Sidon, other kings of Zimri and Elam, and he told them to drink this cup of Jehovah's judgments. But did you notice that the reasoning why they would have to be punished? He said, for look, I am bringing calamity first on the city that bears my name. Should you go unpunished? So again, he says, God is bringing a sword against all the inhabitants of the earth. So again, we're talking about the final judgment when Christ comes. And how does the judgment begin? God is bringing calamity first on the city that bears my name. Does that have a modern counterpart? You don't have to be a genius to figure that out, do you? The apostle said judgment starts first with the house of God. Does the house of God bear the name of God? Well, Jehovah's Witnesses say it does. So the calamity begins with Jehovah's Witnesses, with the leadership, the majestic ones of the flock, the shepherds. They will not escape Jehovah's judgment. And one of the reasons God is going to bring himself into judgment is because of this lie that they have perpetrated in the name of Jehovah. This lie that Christ has been ruling, that he has given his blessing, unqualified blessing, and that all of Jehovah's Witnesses are merely waiting for God to destroy Christendom and Babylon the Great. And that article that this daily text is taken from says that very thing. And they decry that, imagine the religious organizations that lie about God's purpose and his name, blah, blah, blah. And they've perpetrated one of the biggest frauds ever. So they're going to have to drink the cup of Jehovah's rage first. And it will be against the backdrop of World War, right? And it's coming. We're right there, my friends. So I think the leadership of the Watchtower is going to be singing the blues. So let's leave it at that, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.